Hi there, welcome to my tutorial on using the sine rule to find a missing side and a missing angle. If we've got a scalene triangle rather than a right angle triangle, we cannot use basic trigonometry to be able to work out missing sides and angles. We have to use what's known as advanced trigonometry, that is the sine rule and the cosine rule. These are given to you in your formula booklet at the front of your GCSE higher paper. So the two rules are as follows. You've got the sine rule, which states that little a over sin a equals little b over sin b equals little c over sin c. You've also got the cosine rule, and that states that a squared equals b squared plus c squared, take away 2bc cos big A. Now, we're going to use the sine rule first of all to work out a missing side. But before we can do that, you've got to learn how to label the triangles, because it's totally different to basic trig where we labelled it opposite, hypotenuse, adjacent. If we've got a scalene triangle, we label the angles as uppercase, and we label this angle uppercase A. The side that's opposite to that is labelled as lowercase a. This side here we can label, this angle here we can label as uppercase B, and the side that's opposite it lowercase b. And then finally you'll have uppercase C and lowercase c. And that's how you've got to get used to labelling these triangles when you're using sine and cosine rules. Now, for this example, we're going to try and find the missing side x, and we're going to use the sine rule to do that, this first rule. I know that I'm using the sine rule because if I'm finding a side and I know two angles and one side, I use the sine rule. If you do it wrong and you choose the other one, what will happen is you'll know you've done it wrong, because if I was using the cosine rule, I'd end up running out of things to put into my formula, so you know it must be the other one. But we're going to use the sine rule to work out x. First thing we need to do is we need to label this triangle. Always label the side you want to find as A. So if I label this as little a, then the opposite angle becomes big A. Now I'm not going to use B and C. All I now need to do is look at the side and angle, the other side and angle that I know. And we're just going to label that as big B and little b. Because we don't know the angle and the other side, we don't need to use C. Now all I need to do is I need to use this part of my formula and replace the letters with the numbers or angles that we know. So my formula, let me write it down again, just part of it. A over sin A equals little b over sin big B. Now I'm going to replace the letters with what I know in the question. So little a, I don't know. That's what we're trying to find out, so that's x. But I do know that sin a is going to be sin of 40. So I write sin 40. Now that's equal to little b, which I know is 8, over sin b, and b is 50, so it's sin 50. Now remember, I want to find x, so I want to have x on its own. In order to do that, I need to get rid of this sin 40. Because I'm dividing by sin 40, to get rid of it, I times by sin 40. If I times by sin 40 on that side, it gets rid of it, but I must do the same to the other side. So in effect, it's a case of moving this and timesing the 8 by sin 40. So I then get x equals 8 times sin 40. I do not need to write the times in, as long as I'm writing the number in front of the sign, over sin 50. Now all I need to do is actually work that out. So On the calculator, we have to type in, use your fraction button, so 8 sin 40 divided by sin 50 gives me an answer of 6.71. So x equals 6.71, and that is correct to 3 significant figures. Okay, the second part now, we're going to use the sine rule to find a missing angle. So if you remember how to label the triangle for when we were finding the missing side, this is very, very similar. When you find the missing angle, you would need to know two sides and an angle, and that would tell you need to use the sine rule. The sine rule changes slightly though when you're finding a missing angle, and you don't get given this version of the sine rule, so you must remember this. It turns it upside down. So when we're finding a missing angle, we're using sin A over little a is equal to sin B over little b. All that's happened is it's inverted, it's turned upside down. Once you've done that, then it's exactly the same process as when you were finding the missing side. So we label our triangle, making sure that the angle we want to find we label as A, but it's big A this time. The opposite side will be little a, and then the other angle that we know we label as B, and the one opposite that will be little b. Now it's just a case of replacing the letters with the numbers that we know. So sin A, we don't know that, so we write sin x, but we do know that little a is 21. We do know sin B because B is 40, so we've got sin 40, and we know little b is 19. And just as we did when we were finding the missing side, we want to have this part, the sin x, on its own, so we need to times both sides by 21. So we're basically moving that 21 up to there and times in. That's going to give us sin x is now going to equal 21 times sin 40 over 19. So then we need to work that part out. So on our calculator we do 21 sin 40 divided by 19, and that gives us a value for sin x. Sin x equals 0.710, and that number continues on. Keep that on your calculator. Now what we've got to do, to find x, we need to do the inverse of that. We need to find the sin to the negative 1. So our sin to the negative 1 of 0.710 is going to give us 45.27 or 45.3 degrees to 3 significant figures.